Hello and welcome to Dot, the podcast that connects the dots on how to be you, with me, Fiona Murden, psychologist and author. Today I am thrilled to be joined by Michael Schneider of Secret Source and my special friend and colleague, Peri Cadasta, who has much experience in entrepreneurship. Michael, you are an entrepreneur. You're living the entrepreneur life. Tell us a bit about Secret Source.
So Secret Sauce is a community founded for people who are really interested in sneakers, streetwear, collectibles, anything that's like kind of current culture with Gen Z, and has some sort of additional value and representation within that generation and within the generations interested in pop culture before. So Secret Sauce is there to provide a solution for people to start acquiring assets that may be untangible or intangible to other categories. So things like high-end sneakers and Jordans that have limited drops, formerly before all the chaos Yeezys, right? If you look at collectibles, think like cause figures and things like that. So I like to look at it as kind of a modern day art form that people are interested in, they're excited about, and we're an all-in-one resource for them.
Incredible. So it's a pretty, I think you say in America, niche, but I would say niche because I'm English. In some ways, I mean, you'll be surrounded by people who have the same interest doing the same thing. So it won't feel niche to you, but to someone from, I don't know, say, who works in financial services in London, it might be quite novel to them. What's your view on that, and how did you end up doing it? Because with a career or a job or a vocation like you have, you may consider it a vocation, there isn't you leave school and this is what you'll do. It takes its own form. So how did you end up where you are now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the culture itself evolved from, lines outside of Supreme and for Nike dunk drops at Prince and Mercer Street in New York City, right? And so that ended up becoming kind of ground zero for what evolved into this culture. And people were going after these limited edition sneakers, the first one being the Pigeon Dunk, which was catastrophically turned into, some moderate version of a riot, where people were trying to get this limited edition sneaker that was releasing, a collaboration between Jeff Staple and Nike. And so that evolved into a culture where people were waiting outside in the streets of New York and trying to acquire these shoes, either to, keep for themselves, resell to somebody who was interested in them, et cetera. So someone in financial services might be like, wow, I really want those shoes, but I'm not going to go wait on the street for them. And so, somebody would go wait on the street, and then depending on how difficult that was, that would basically adjust the price, how much supply there was and how much demand. So it's a fairly new market. I mean, it's only, really had prevalence for 20 years is the beginning. And, coming into, I would say the mid 2010s is when it started to grow and started to become more accessible. Specifically with the rise of Virgil Abloh. And so around that, design started to more so reflect what these kids were wanting, right? You saw Virgil Abloh obviously get appointed the men's director at Louis Vuitton, et cetera. So the design world started to catch up to what was happening in the streets and what was happening with the segment. So our goal has always been to give these guys a leg up. I'm kind of a champion of underdogs, so to speak. Like, the guys who are really willing to put in the hustle, the work, et cetera. That's something I've always respected. My father, when I was growing up, right around the time I was 3 to 5 years old, kind of in that range, there was a Power Rangers toy I really wanted. It was this big dinosaur Power Ranger toy, and you could only buy it in Canada. Well, that was fascinating. We lived in Texas, right? And so what he realized is, okay, if I could go to Canada and I could get a lot of these, let me bring it to Dallas and see what I could do. And so he brought it to Texas with him, brought tons of these toys. I think he bought a couple hundred of them and shipped a pallet back, and was taking out newspaper articles to sell them, and was selling them for quite a margin. This was before the time that eBay was even developed, right? But then eBay came on the scene, was able to basically revolutionize that business. So I've always had a passion for people who have looked for unique arbitrage opportunities and said, okay, I want to go at it. I want to do it. My career has been kind of a longer stretch. I moved to Los Angeles knowing I wanted to get into the entertainment industry, knowing, I wanted to be around the media culture that is Los Angeles. I started out in film and television production, basically my first day here, moved into event production for some period after that, anything from, small parties and warehouses all the way to massive festivals. And so I've worked basically on varying levels of all of the above. And after doing that, I finally was like, okay, this lifestyle is a little too quick and fast for me. And so what I ended up doing was getting more into marketing, understanding the media landscape and understanding culture. Got more into marketing. Originally as a paid media agency, it was easy to be a tech services provider and just figure out, okay, is there some way we can adjust the marketing landscape? This was before Facebook had integrated big data. I had a relationship with a big data company and realized we could infer modeling from traditional big data sources into Facebook. Started doing that for a number of years. Eventually said, this is kind of boring, and got back to my roots of event production and live television, and started doing political activism around the 2016 campaigns, supporting with live stream shows and events and things like that. And then from there, I realized, I really have a skill set that can help agencies figure out their products and what they're doing and what they're providing to their clients. The service-based industry, it's only so much fun, but I definitely had cut my teeth there, so to speak, and signed on with a couple different agencies, helping them service their clients. Eventually got to one that was servicing a Fortune 50 brand, Target, and was supporting that across pretty much all of their celebrity and influencer campaigns. So at that point, I got to roughly doing 100 to 120 different individual activations with influencers and celebrities annually, which is quite a bit. It was quite a bit of deal flow. It was quite a bit of volume, but it definitely was a great area for me to learn a little bit more about running a business, because that in itself was a business, and in doing such, I was like, okay, this is fun. And some of the kids I was around at the agency were very creative, I'll put, they all had their different interests, right? For different forms of culture, etc. And I had kind of lost that spark. I had gotten really good at the business side, but the hobby and the excitement and the things that made me had kind of gone away a little bit. One of the kids pointed it out. He's like, you need to get a hobby. You need to get into something. That had me resurge in streetwear and sneakers. I was like, oh, this is something I understand. I get, I come from a background that is clearly brings me onto this path. And in that, realized we could found secret sauce and provide a toolkit for people, where platforms like eBay and StockX and GOAT, which you may or may not be aware of, all were providing a sales function for people. If you acquired a sneaker, you were able to go sell it. Well, nobody was really providing how do you actually go get the sneaker, right? How do you actually go get the product? And so it was a clear opportunity in the market. We ended up founding Secret Sauce. It was been an interesting journey. I'm happy to chat more about it, but that's how I got there.
That's massively interesting. Perry, I know you'll have thoughts on this. What, as a marketer yourself, what were you thinking when Michael was sharing his story?
Well, I love the fact that something like marketing can mean so many different things and take on a life that meanders, throughout one's career, and that can change quite a bit. But what really stuck with me, I think, is the fact that you took this notion of, like you said, you lost your spark, And that actually became the impetus and the opportunity and the aha moment for you to actually create something that is brand new and is a source of your passion. So I just I love that, because especially in the lives of entrepreneurs, you feel so many dips, and you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel necessarily until you're there. So for someone going through a dip, for example, what would your thoughts be in terms of finding that spark again?
Yeah, this was a shower thought of mine earlier, for lack of a better term. But I was honestly, I was like, I think in my 20s, I was always hoping it would get easier. Right. I was always like, at some point, I'm going to hit the level of success where it gets easier and I'm going to feel better and I'm going to have all the things I want. It's the mentality of, once I have the things I want, then I'll do all the things I need to do and I'll be the person I want to be. And I like to flip that on his head and say, okay, well, how can you be happy in spite of that? How can you be the person you want to be, then do the things you want to do, and then ultimately get the rewards that you want? So instead of, have, do, be, which most people think, once I have it, I'll be great, be, do, have. Right. How can I be that inspiring person? And so for me, thinking about that in the context of, the ups and downs, it's like not having the expectation that it's going to get easier, because I hate to, blow the wind out of anyone's sails. It doesn't. It doesn't. It actually gets more challenging as you get older, as your career goes on. The stakes get higher. The risks get higher, especially in entrepreneurship. It gets increasingly more challenging. But I think that the relationship with those challenges is something that's entirely important to people, and that to me is like the precipice of mental health. It's like, I know, right, not a perfect person. I'm first to admit, definitely not a perfect person. In my 20s, my relationship to stress and anxiety, or any sort of external stress and anxiety, was not healthy, right? It was, oh my gosh, the world is crumbling around me. My relationship to existential crises at this point in my life, much different, right? How do I have a balanced and measured approach to it? And how do I, understand that maybe it's not as catastrophic as it might be? So how to deal with the ebbs and flows, I think, there's a couple key components to it. One, having some degree of faith, whether it be faith in a higher power, or faith in yourself, or faith in the universe, or whatever sort of structure you agree in. Everything's going to be okay, right? And if at some level you inherently believe that, then nothing can really rock you. Nothing can really take you off your kilter. And then I think faith is step one, and then understanding like the difference between an emotional reaction and a rational, right? Like, how do you sit in between those, and what is in between those? It's something my therapist, yes, I see a therapist, it likes to call the wise mind, sits between the rational and the emotional. And I think when you're able to access and say, okay, using a little bit of what I'm getting from my emotional mind, a little bit of what I'm getting from my rational mind, can I make the decision that's really right here, instead of doing something that's entirely counterproductive, or something that I know I'm going to regret later? Can I potentially just make a decision that's based and grounded on my core values, on who I am, on who I want to show up as in the world? And so I think between those two things, dealing with the ebbs and flows is doable, right? If you just kind of ride the wave, it will ride you into a very dark place in some places.
Definitely. I mean, Perry and I nodding, because what you're saying totally resonates with, I know, our own experience, but also what we have in Ochre as a product, but also, what we've been talking about a lot over the last year or so. But I, as a psychologist who's worked with leaders in all sorts of different situations, I've seen that have does not give, if that makes sense. There's attaining that success, even if it's not a financial success, but status, it's hollow, because if you're not intrinsically motivated by it, if it's not driven by what really means something to you, then there's always something else you have to go after. But that doesn't mean the alternative, like you say, is easy, because but if you have an understanding of what I call it, what meaning means to you, then it provides you with that anchor, so that the sea can be rough and the boat can move around, but you know that you've still got that anchor in the same place, and you're heading in the same way. But what I noticed from what you're saying is, you at some intuitive level, you've had that all along, because you've kind of, when you've gone off course, you've course corrected, you've taken a step back and gone, hang on a minute, I'm not actually doing what lights me up here, and that's not what my life should be about. That's quite, it's quite a skill doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not perfect, right?
I didn't say you were perfect.
I've definitely, I mean, I've gone off course for years at a time, to be completely frank. I've built a remarkable sneaker collection. It's something I cherish, etc. But, when those kind of things or material things took precedent over who I am as a person, that has not been my best self. And so I'm in full recognition on when I've prioritized having over who I want to be, and definitely had those moments, even for extended periods of time. And I think that, when we really look at how we want to show up in the world, and how we want to be as a human being, and how we want to feel, even, how you want to feel about yourself, like chasing the money, chasing the status, chasing the success, chasing the power, chasing the item, can be really rewarding, but you've got to be able to prioritize where it matters, right? You've got to be able to put family above it. You've got to be able to put yourself above it. You got to be able to put your goals above it. And the second that it becomes kind of, and I realize this is somewhat antithetical to what we even do as a business, right? It's somewhat antithetical to capitalism as a whole, right? Because we're kind of ingratiated, trained, to go chase. But when we really focus on, the things that matter and prioritizing our lives correctly, in a way that is beneficial to who we want to be, I think that's where people find more happiness, find more success, even.
Mm-hmm.
Because it becomes less about comparison, right? It becomes less about, oh, I don't have this, but this guy does. Oh, I don't have this, but this pop star is living this lifestyle. It becomes less about that. It becomes more about what you're uniquely bringing out into the world, and what you're uniquely providing to the world. And so, I always encourage people that are having a low moment, including even myself, is like, okay, how can I focus outward? How can I provide something to someone else and give a positive experience to someone else?
That was exactly what I was about to just ask you, because pro-sociality, I don't know if you've heard of that term, but it's basically our propensity to want to help other people that somehow gets buried in the way that we're brought up through the way we live and society and messaging and what have you, is one of the best tonics for mental health. But, we have to find our own way of doing that. It has to be a way of giving back that we're not doing out of duty. It's a similar sort of thing, but we're doing out of what makes me light up. When I see that old person's face, when I hold the door open, when I smile, when I say hello, or it could be, donating money. It could be different things for different people. But that, the research, as you'll know, because as you said, you've read loads around this stuff, shows that pro-sociality is a huge component of our own well-being. And I think it's drummed out of us. I think we are naturally actually far more altruistic and pro-social than we grow up to be.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as an entrepreneur, like closing a round of capital or hitting a revenue goal, et cetera, can be really, really exciting. But I don't know.
Demotivating as well.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I mean, not to make that wrong. Like, I mean, I think it's actually a great thing, and I think it's something that you should celebrate, right? But I would say that the more like meaningful and fulfilling aspects of the work I've done have been when I've been able to sit with someone in a hard time. Like when I've been able to have a conversation and really reach to somebody when they're at a point where they need to be motivated. And not that you need to seek people out that are having a hard time. Like you can be generous and giving to people who are even at the best of times. But I think that, being able to support someone else on their journey is just as fulfilling as your own milestones, if not even more in some cases.
I was going to say it's just important because the journey of an entrepreneur is often a lonely one. And some of those highs and lows, you're kind of absorbing yourself. So what are some of the steps that you take to kind of keep yourself either grounded? Maybe it's mentors in your life. Maybe it's just inspiration from the tastemakers that you work with. But who are some of the other parties that kind of make up your personal little ecosystem that keeps you grounded and keeps you going?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it feels like it's been fluctuating, and I've been trying to find the right components for that for a long period. You know, for some reason, I'm 33 years old, right? And most of the people that I look up to, I talk to, and 33 was a hard time, and I'm no different than them. Like I had a very difficult year in a lot of ways. And those are the people who can be realist with me, who can, have a conversation with me about how they, rose out of adversity, how they dealt with challenges and issues. Those are the ones that inspire me the most. And so, yeah, I would say it was a journey to find not only a therapist, but the right therapist. I mean, I think that is huge, right? And just having someone to check you, because entrepreneurship, we were just talking, I think, slightly before this about the hypomanic edge. And if you go and survey a group of entrepreneurs, you'll see that they basically all qualify for hypomania, right? So it is very easy to lose yourself into hypomania, especially during entrepreneurship. It's almost rewarded. Your VCs want you to have an incredible energy about you, et cetera, and be sort of invigorating. And so having someone to check and be honest with you about where you're at, I think is incredibly valuable. So I think therapists, huge. Mine, Andy Saunders, love him, think he's great. It took a long time to find that person. The other thing I think in mentorship that is super helpful is finding people who can relate to where you've been and actually listening to it. It's like the most mistakes I think I've made in my entrepreneurship journey were completely avoidable had I listened to people I asked questions about before I made the mistakes, and I think that when you find people who have been through it, who have come out successful on the other side, who emulate what you ultimately want to obtain, I think actually being able to take the advice, listen to the advice, and implement the advice can be incredibly valuable. So, I have mentors that range the gamut, right? Whether it be and they may not even know the impact they have on my life, right? But whether it be CEOs who specialize in mergers and acquisitions, whether it be private equity guys who have just figured out how to make a deal-making process and unique stances on marketing, whether it be guys who are culturally driven and recognized as top-tier designers, and have created something out of really challenging situations, but become a cultural icon in the space we operate. Like, I would say those kind of people, when you find people that interest you, intrigue you, there's always something to learn. You may not like the advice, you may not want the advice, you may flat out reject the advice, but it's only going to lead, at least in my experience, doing that only leads to more pain. So, I think when it comes to mentorship, and when it comes to surrounding yourselves with the right people, friends are important. Can't put too much weight on your friends, but you can have a good time with your friends. Therapist is important. You can put a lot on your therapist, and that's what you pay them for. And that's where you should use as an outlet for that. Mentors, you can get really valuable advice from, and finding people that I think represent where you want to go. Likely they've been there before. They know the warning signs and the dangers, and you've got to be willing to accept that advice.
What do you think of on the mentor side of things, peer mentor? So, I mean, we might be giving it too many labels, but the person who's maybe just one or two steps ahead of you, maybe even on the same sort of in the same stage of life as you, but is within the community of people who are doing a similar sort of thing. Now, what you do, as we said before, is very niche. So you probably don't look around and have a whole load of people like that. And would you say in that case, that can be actually one of the things that's hard about being an entrepreneur is there isn't someone else who's sort of level pegging with you. You don't have that group of peers who are doing something similar.
Yeah, it's interesting. I almost consider those friends, right? Like I do have people that I like to support in that. And I think I've realized my strengths, right? And I think that's really important to really, at least for me, to find peers that I can socialize with, and not necessarily like get competitive with, right? I'm naturally a very competitive person as an entrepreneur. I'm just competitive. I think probably the biggest thing in that has been realizing my strengths. Weaknesses probably still have some work to do on, but strengths I know, right? I'm really good at go-to-market strategy. I know how to take a product to market, how to make a cultural impact, and how to launch it. And that's the biggest challenge. I mean, a lot of people don't even think big enough on that. And that's usually my general feedback is like, hey, you want to get a new product to market. Are you really adapting it to culture the way it needs to get you where you need to go? So I know that's a strength of mine, right? And I'm happy to own that in a conversation. Like, you want to talk go-to-market strategy? Let's talk about that. I know my strengths, they're not really hiring. I wouldn't say hiring or organizational development or organizational structure and mapping are my strengths. Some other things, deal making, etc. I know it's a strength of mine. And so when I'm able to find people who really have a vision for, how to build structurally their company, etc., I find that fascinating. And so I think that for me, being willing to be impressed, being willing to be open, being willing to be motivated by somebody else who's perhaps more of a peer than someone who's already done it, makes a really, really good friend. It makes somebody that, hopefully you can help. I like helping people. So intrinsically, that's where I go to. But I do think that you'll find things you like, but it's almost hard for me to call that person a mentor because to me, I don't want to call that person up and just vent about what I'm going through. That's not fair. That's not really fair to them. I'm a little hesitant to call someone who's kind of at the same place a mentor because that's where my mind goes. It's like, okay, well, how do I vent to that person versus a mentor who's like, it feels like somebody who could really help you with the challenges versus like somebody who you're engaged in the excitement with. And generally I find with peers, we get more, okay, well, how do we push this forward? How do we get the next thing done? Which is almost more like friendship.
I smiled when you said that you're competitive because that's definitely a trait that I think is very common in entrepreneurs, which is, not necessarily sharp elbows, but kind of eyes on the prize, wanting to win and get ahead. And I'm just curious how you think about competition, competitiveness as an entrepreneur. For example, NFTs, non-fungible tokens, are those impacting your space? How are you staying kind of current and ahead of potential threats and risks and competitors? And, what leadership lessons can we draw from you in that space?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, NFTs had a big impact in collectibles as a whole during COVID, especially, right? And kind of we saw even like the whole music industry almost shifted over into NFTs. Those projects got incredibly well funded, et cetera. And so obviously that market's declined a little bit. We actually just went through an acquisition of a company that specializes in information providing around NFTs. I'm still somewhat long on it, right? I'm not saying, hey, the projects right now, are things you should go invest in unless you've got a pretty quick strategy with it. But I think that, long-term, the technology is going to prevail. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Staying ahead of the curve is probably our biggest challenge because it happens so quick. And so adapting like our product and our services to, new fads, trends, et cetera, can be really challenging. it's definitely been an area that I'd like to even be faster on. I think that's been like adaptation of product can be really, really challenging, at least for me, and I don't think I've found somebody who has really mastered it, at least in my life, where I've been like, oh, that's somebody who was able to adapt their product and change it. Like most people, they find product market fit and then they go, okay, I've got product market fit. Let me just roll out this product. And then they never change the product. And the product either has legs for a long period of time or it doesn't. And so I think it is challenging. And when it comes to competition, it's like, you're going to have people in the same space. I think that besides product market fit, I've been pitched on a number of technology solutions, et cetera, that they all fall the same. I always love to go back to the story of live stream sales. And I think it's been something recently, people understand it and get it. It's not a new idea, right? Like it's been around for a while. It's 30% of e-commerce in Asia. It's not even 10% in the US. And so companies have been running that pitch for a decade. Well, recently, two companies, are in the $1 billion valuation range on it, and everyone else is kind of down the ladder, right? Whatnot and Network. Pop Shop Live is behind them on that. And then you've got pretty much everyone else. Well, you might have had product market fit, right? You might have had a great product coming to the market with an opportunity at the right time, et cetera. But what had, these two kind of rise above everyone else? Was it, a talented CEO? Was it a talented product team? Was it the product was better? Honestly, I think that it's like, there's got to be a degree of luck, timing, and cultural fit. And this is where my strength, again, is go-to-market strategy. So I can look at something in this and I can be like, well, here's what they did right. And here's what you should try to emulate. The best thing to ever happen for Whatnot specifically was Logan Paul opening Pokemon cards. It started out as we're going to do live breaks, which are already happening on TikTok and Instagram and kind of anywhere you could live stream on socially. But that moment happening when they were funding their company with the right amount of funding was able to generate the attention from someone like a Logan Paul and ride that cultural wave, be part of that cultural wave, fuel that cultural wave in a way that was bigger than, just a simple moment. And that's what every other platform lacked. If there was anyone else, it wasn't the product, it wasn't the leadership, et cetera. It was simply, cultural moment. How do we create it? How do we ride on it, et cetera? I think you've got a lot of great entrepreneurs out there with a lot of great ideas. They might be totally right on the idea. I don't think there's a shortage of $1 billion ideas in the world. I think there's plenty. I think really getting people to adopt something like that is much different. That's where you need culture to really change and shift. And so when you've got live stream sales, they've created a cultural edge for themselves based on what was happening. So there's that element with Whatnot. And then with Network, similar but different, right? Founder of Network, also founder of ComplexCon, clearly understood the culture going into what he was doing, had the credentials, et cetera. What I think they've done that's been impressive and kind of given them the leg up has been, since they have such a deep understanding of the culture, they've been able to partner with the tastemakers, right? And partner with the people in the industry, like a Murakami, right? That to make new product, to make things accessible that are exclusive to their platform. And I think that's really given them a position in it, because if you look at the history of, collectibles, of sneakers, et cetera, they've already cemented their place in it by doing that. And so I think that, two different approaches, both were successful. One was riding a cultural wave. The other one was participating in it. But if you're not effectively able to do either, I think that's where these companies end up failing. And so that's why I always, when I'm talking to someone about go-to-market strategy, I'm like, are you thinking big enough? Because I get it. If you can get user acquisition, if you can get costs down and customer acquisition costs down, et cetera, you think you're going to have success. From business fundamentals, it sounds successful, right? But if you really want to cross the chasm, so to speak, if you really want to take it to cultural adaptation and have one of these unicorns that, people are chasing, you need to own the cultural moment.
And I think that's so fascinating. And when you were talking, I was thinking about literally surfing. So when you sit on your board and you wait for a wave, that could be a great wave. You have to make your judgment call as to whether that is going to be a great wave to ride, and if anyone else is getting on that wave, and then you have to hope that you ride it well if you're going to ride it, and then you take the energy and the momentum of that wave to take you to the shore. But I think from a psychological perspective, I find all of that absolutely fascinating as well. The cultural wave, what that means at a collective level, and how you do need to tap into it, because until if you don't jump on it, you can't be the person creating that. There has to be some momentum behind it already, and it's where is it at, and can you spot where it's at, and can you make the leap at the right time? But I mean, I would think, and this is from a naive perspective, that there's also elements, like you said, there's luck, timing as well. There's an element of judgment to whether you're jumping on that wave or not.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with a single or a double play, right? A collection of single plays will lead you to plenty of success in your life, and you can build those without those big cultural moments. I think as entrepreneurs and VC influenced culture, we're trained to chase the grand slam. And what I'm talking about is how to achieve the grand slam. But there's nothing wrong with going for the single or the double play either. It may not be a fit to the VC model. It may not be a fit to be, Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk. And not everyone needs that, right? I forget the name of the founder, but a big founder who was out of San Francisco was giving a commencement speech to a graduating class of entrepreneurs, and was basically like, look, some of you need to go be Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, right? Like, some of you need that in your life, and that's totally fine. But some of you will be just fine having a few wins, right? Having a few easy wins. So it depends on what you think is a necessity, right? And kind of what your level is. And I think, often there's so much reward, especially from like venture capitalists, in chasing the big wave, right? And there is a way to do it. Like, there is a method to that madness, but it's not necessarily for everybody. And it shouldn't be, right? It's not that. I don't think it's the healthiest way of living by any means. There's a method to doing it and whatnot, but you could go for a much smaller wave too. You could go on a paddleboard and be fine, right? Like, there's other approaches to life besides just grandiose entrepreneurship that are totally going to lead you to a path where you may own your home at the end of it. You may be happy. You'll have a family. You may have a more balanced life than somebody who went and chased the big wave. If you want to get into the $1 billion valuation range, guess what? You got to hit the wave, right? If you want to get to selling your company for 10 to 20 million, you may be able to paddle your way out there. It's just a matter of what your targets and your sights are.
I find that fascinating. I mean, one of the groups that have come onto our platform early on are called Impact Finance Pro, and they're about philanthropy, making deals that have different deal structure to the traditional VC investment, where there's more sustainability, both in terms of the company itself, but also what it's offering in terms of social impact or climate impact. I've been talking to all sorts of people in this space, and it is fascinating. I do think that the type of entrepreneurship you're describing is right for some people. It's like that lady who said, for the commencement speech, it's exciting, it's competitive, it takes certain skills to be able to do it, but it's also important to be able to enjoy it. And if you're not enjoying it, it's like, it comes back to what you were saying earlier. It's if it is not lighting you up, if it is draining you more than it is giving you, if the stress is negative rather than positive stress, because we know there's positive stress, then maybe it's not for you. But that doesn't mean you're a failure. And it doesn't mean, there's a group, I don't know if it's global, I think it is. It's called Zebras Unite. Have you heard of that?
Mm-mm.
I think you'd be interested in it. It's a group that say, we don't just have to have unicorns, we can have zebras too. And the zebras are actually real. And there's a fantastic Medium article titled Zebras Fix What Unicorns Break. And it comes back to what you're saying as well about the capitalist model. And I think there's room for different approaches, but it's really fascinating once you start delving into it and understanding, which I think a lot of people don't. They only see the unicorn, the entrepreneur, the VC backed, the exits, within however many years. So that's really, really great as well for me that you came back to. It's not necessarily right for everyone, because that totally resonates with what you were saying earlier on. It's like finding what was right for you, and clearly you enjoy this environment.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that, like, society really idolizes the entrepreneur right now. Like Elon, I had a friend who's an incredibly successful 23-year-old entrepreneur who I admire. I want to support in his career entirely. Totally trust his leadership, which is amazing for me to say at someone at that age, because I would have hoped no one would have said that about me at that age.
Me neither.
Yeah, I would have hoped no one would have been so blind. Really a fascinating individual. And I was talking to him, and what we were discussing really brought me back to what's possible for somebody who's able to go after it. And I think that, like, one thing he pointed out to me about entrepreneurs was that they're the new rock stars, right? Elon Musk autograph is actually the most expensive autograph in the world right now, if you want to look at markets of autographs, right? Which is kind of amazing, right? That you would have talked 30 years ago, that would have never been the case. No one cared about, a John McAfee or a Mark Andreessen or Peter Thiel's autograph, right? Or a Bill Gates even. And so I think the world's changed to where we idolize these people who have made this giant difference. And it's reflective in our markets, right? It's reflective in even just that tidbit. But to imagine that is the only means to success, it's an impossible feat, right? It's not even the 0.1%. I mean, it's some iota of that. And so, it's nice to learn from those people, but their style, their approach, their work ethic doesn't work in most situations, right? That's not how you should show up in most ways. That is a very rare, version of success. And I think that people ultimately, while we do idolize them as the modern day rock stars, I do think that, having a level-headedness and a business practicality about you can be really valuable too. And look, that's not to say you don't have an impact as big as the next Facebook or Tesla, right? Like, if you do, more power to you, go for it. But it's incredibly rare to find that, incredibly rare. And, yes, it's rewarded like rockstar culture here, and it's not for everybody. And it doesn't need to be. You can find success as an entrepreneur without it. I've seen plenty of people do it. You can hit a single play, you can hit a double play, one or two of those, you're good. Gotten the level of success you needed. And that would be, my litmus test for most people is, like, really being honest with where your play is at and making it make sense, because those companies do last for a long time. I've got plenty of admiration for people who have, made innovations in real estate, who have made innovations in more boring businesses like the legal industry, etc. Like, I think that creating those more sustainable business, the zebras, as you mentioned, is really admirable, and it definitely keeps the economy going. Not everything has to be a home run.
I've found that absolutely fascinating. Very.
Absolutely. Really interesting. Just everything stemming from the story of your father first getting that Power Rangers toy in Canada to kind of where we are now, and your thoughts on the fact that success has different definitions. I think you really covered a lot of the realities of entrepreneurship, the good and the bad, the pretty and the ugly that we don't always talk about. So thank you for your time. I think it's just incredible.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you to your audience for listening. I hope there's been some valuable. I hope there's valuable tidbits. I hope there's some groundedness in it, and some encouragement. I think success can have a lot of different definitions, and really defining that for yourself is important. So thank you guys for having me.
And where can people find you, Michael, if they want to follow you? Are you on Twitter? Are you on LinkedIn? Or if it's just a case of actually having a look at Secret Sauce? And
yeah, you can have a look at Secret Sauce. That's totally fine, at Secret Sauce GRP. I'm on LinkedIn, Michael L. Schneider, or you can find me on Instagram at Hype Rogan, like Seth Rogen, because
Excellent.
I look and sound like him. So I decided to go with that. So I'm all.
I didn't want to say it, but you do.
My inbox is open. I'm always willing to chat with people on their journey. So I appreciate you guys giving me the platform and the opportunity.
Oh, we really appreciate your time. And, hopefully when Perry and I both in LA at the same time, we can take you out for lunch or coffee or something like
That'd be great.
If you drinking. Anyway.
I'm sober at the moment, but
yeah.
definitely we'll take you up on that.
Thank you so much. Have a great day over there. I'm going into my evening. You're going into your day.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Thanks to my guest. Thanks to you for listening. If you want to find out more about me and my work, go to fionamerden.com, or my social media handle is also Fiona Merden. If you enjoyed this, please do subscribe, review, and tell your friends. It'd be a massive help. But for now, goodbye, and I hope you have a great week.